Can I tell you a secret no one warns new caregivers about? Most of the guilt you will ever feel will come from things you didn't even know you shouldn't be doing. Not because you're careless, not because you're unkind, but because Sjogren's caregiving is a world no one has prepared you for. So, in today's video, I'm going to give you 10 things to never do as a new Sjogren's caregiver. Not to shame you, but to set you free. Before we get into the list, care partners, it's important to understand something. Sjogren's is an autoimmune disease, which means the immune system attacks the body's own moisture-producing glands, the eyes, the mouth, the skin, but it doesn't stop there. It also drives deep, bone-heavy fatigue, joint and muscle pain, and something patients call brain fog, a fuzzy, hard-to-predict dip in focus and memory. Here's the part that trips up a lot of caregivers. Your loved one usually looks completely fine on the outside. There's no visible injury, no wheelchair, sometimes not even a limp. But underneath, their immune system may be waging a full-scale war on any given day. And unlike a lot of conditions, Sjogren's doesn't move in one steady direction. It flares and it eases, sometimes within the same week, sometimes within the same afternoon. So when your loved one seems fine at breakfast and wiped out by lunch, it's not inconsistency and it's not exaggeration. It's the disease. The way I explain it to new care partners is to imagine a phone battery that drains at a different rate every single day, and you never know the percentage until you try to use it. You can't manage a battery like that by pushing it the way you'd push a fully charged one. What I'm going to show you today is how to actually read the charge level your loved one is running on, instead of assuming it's the same as yesterday. First, care partners, never assume today matches yesterday. This is the single hardest habit to break, and I understand why. As humans, we naturally use yesterday as our baseline for today. If a friend went hiking yesterday, we assume they can go for a walk today. That's logical, and it's how most healthy bodies work. But Sjogren's doesn't play by that rule. Your loved one might have hosted the whole family on Saturday, laughing, cooking, standing at the stove for hours, and then be unable to get off the couch on Sunday. It's tempting to think, well, you did it fine last week, so what's different now? But that's not how autoimmune fatigue works. It isn't a fixed capacity that you can count on like a bank balance that stays the same unless you spend it. It's a moving target that resets, sometimes for reasons no one, not even your loved one's doctor, can fully explain. Weather changes, sleep quality, stress, hormones, even a minor cold can shift where that number lands on any given morning. When you hold your loved one to yesterday's performance, even gently, even without meaning to, it can trigger a wave of guilt. Now they feel like they are letting you down for something that is completely outside their control. They start to dread the question, but you did it yesterday, because it turns a physical reality into a referendum on their character. Over time, this can push people to either overexert themselves to avoid disappointing you, which leads to a worse flare later, or to withdraw and stop being honest about how they're doing altogether, because it feels safer to just say I'm fine than to explain the unexplainable. Instead, care partners, check in fresh each day, with no assumptions attached. A simple "how's your energy today?" on a scale of 1 to 10, respects that the number changes, and it isn't a character flaw when it's low. You might even keep a quiet mental note or a shared notes app where you track the number together over a few weeks. Not to judge it, but to understand the pattern, so that both of you stop being surprised by the ups and downs and start planning around them instead. If you needed to hear that today doesn't have to look like yesterday, type grace in the comments below. Second, care partners, never dismiss symptoms because they are invisible. Sjogren's is often called an invisible illness for a reason. Dry eyes, a dry mouth, joint pain, and crushing fatigue don't show up on the outside the way a broken arm or a fever does. There's no cast, no rash, nothing dramatic to point to. And because of that, it's incredibly easy, even for a deeply loving caregiver, to unintentionally minimize what's happening. You don't look sick, or you were laughing 5 minutes ago, so you can't be in that much pain, or the classic, but you seem fine to me. None of these comments are meant to hurt. Most of the time they're said out of confusion, or even out of hope, because you want your loved one to be okay. But care partners, here's what actually lands on the other end of that sentence. Your loved one hears "I don't believe you," even when that is the furthest thing from what you meant. This matters more than it might seem, because Sjogren's patients already spend a huge amount of energy being disbelieved by the outside world. Doctors sometimes take years to diagnose it. Coworkers assume they're just tired like everyone else. Friends stop inviting them out because they've had to cancel plans before, without understanding why. Your home is supposed to be the one place where they don't have to explain or defend what they are feeling. When that safety gets punctured, even gently, even by accident, it teaches your loved one that sharing their symptoms gets questioned instead of supported, and once that lesson is learned, people stop sharing. They start hiding flares. They start pushing through pain silently. And that silence usually comes back around as resentment, isolation, or a much worse crash later, because no one saw it coming. Instead, care partners take their report of pain or fatigue at face value, the same way you would a fever or a broken bone, even when you can't see it on the outside. You don't have to fully understand the biology to say, "That sounds exhausting, thank you for telling me," or "I believe you, what do you need right now?" Those few words cost you nothing and they give your loved one back something priceless, the feeling of being believed. If you've ever felt unseen for a struggle no one else could see, type "seen" in the comments below. Third, care partners. Never rush them through decisions or tasks. Brain fog is a documented, real symptom in Sjogren's, and it tends to show up hardest when the body is already fighting fatigue, pain, or an active flare. It's not a made-up excuse, and it's not laziness. Researchers describe it as fuzzy thinking, trouble concentrating, and difficulty finding words or making decisions, and it can come and go independent of how well someone slept the night before. If you ask, "What do you want for dinner? Pick something now, we are leaving in 2 minutes," a foggy brain can freeze up entirely, the same way a computer freezes when you open too many tabs at once. It's not indecisiveness for its own sake. It's a nervous system that's already stretched thin from managing pain, dryness, and exhaustion, and simply doesn't have the extra processing power left to sort through 5 restaurant options on the spot. Care partners, I know it can be frustrating to watch someone stall over what feels like a small choice, especially when you're in a hurry. But adding pressure on top of an already overloaded brain rarely speeds things up. It usually does the opposite. It causes a full shutdown, or it causes frustration and snapping, which then makes the outing feel tense before it's even started. And over time, if your loved one associates decision-making with being rushed and judged, they may start avoiding decisions altogether, deferring everything to you, not because they can't think for themselves, but because thinking under pressure has become an unpleasant experience they'd rather skip. Instead, build in extra time and simplify the choices you're offering. Instead of "What do you want for dinner?" try "soup or sandwich, no rush." Instead of a 5-minute countdown to leave the house, give a gentle heads-up 20 minutes ahead of time. Slowing down the pace of a request, and narrowing the options down to 2, often gets you a faster and calmer answer than pressuring for an instant one ever will. It also helps to notice the time of day when fog tends to be heaviest. Some people with Sjogren's find mornings clearer and afternoons foggier, or the reverse, especially after a poor night's sleep. If you notice a pattern, save the bigger decisions, the paperwork, the appointment scheduling, the harder conversations, for whichever window tends to be clearer, and save the simpler routines for the foggier hours. You're not managing a disability, care partners, you're managing a schedule around a rhythm, the same way you'd plan around anyone's natural energy patterns. If you or someone you love needs permission to take things at their own pace, type "patience" in the comments below. Fourth, care partners, never push them to just push through. I know this comes from a good place. You've seen your loved one power through hard things before, and you believe in their strength, so encouraging them to keep going feels like support, not pressure. But with Sjogren's and other chronic autoimmune conditions, pushing through a flare doesn't just cost today. It can trigger what many patients call a payback crash, sometimes days later, where the body demands far more rest to recover than it would have needed if it had simply rested earlier. Think of it like overdrafting a bank account. You can spend more than you have for a little while, but eventually the bill comes due, usually with interest, in the form of a longer, harder crash than the one you were trying to avoid in the first place. Encouraging just one more errand or "you can rest after this" can leave your loved one paying for it for the rest of the week, missing work, canceling plans, or spending days in bed instead of the one afternoon they would have needed if they'd paused sooner. And here's the harder truth, care partners, sometimes it's not even about pushing them. Sometimes your loved one pushes themselves, because they don't want to disappoint you, or because they are tired of feeling like a burden, and if you're the one cheering them on to keep going, you may unknowingly be reinforcing that pattern. Instead, treat rest as part of the plan, not a reward that has to be earned after everything else gets done. Build rest breaks into the day the way you'd build in gas stops on a long road trip. Not optional, not a sign of weakness, just part of the route. You might even be the one who says, out loud, let's stop here for 20 minutes before we keep going. So your loved one doesn't have to be the one to ask for the break and doesn't have to feel guilty about needing it. If rest has ever felt like something you had to earn instead of something you deserve, type rest in the comments below. 5th, care partners. Never ignore the small dryness needs. It sounds minor compared to fatigue or pain, and it's easy for both of you to treat it as an afterthought, but untreated dryness in Sjogrens can snowball into much bigger problems. Dry eyes that go unaddressed can lead to irritation, a gritty or burning sensation, and over time, actual damage to the surface of the eye. A dry mouth doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it raises the risk of cavities, gum disease, and makes chewing and swallowing certain foods genuinely difficult, which can also affect appetite and nutrition. Dry skin can crack, especially around the hands and lips, becoming painful and, in some cases, prone to infection. None of these are dramatic, headline symptoms, but stacked together, day after day, they wear a person down in a way that's easy to underestimate from the outside. It's easy to overlook a water bottle, a pair of eye drops, or a tube of lip balm when there are bigger seeming problems in front of you, like a doctor's appointment to get to or a pain flare to manage. But these small daily supports are often what stands between a manageable day and a genuinely miserable one. Imagine trying to have a conversation, eat a meal, or read a book with sandpaper dry eyes and a mouth that feels like cotton. It's exhausting in a way that compounds every other symptom on the list. Instead, treat hydration and moisture care as a scheduled, non-negotiable part of the day, the same way you'd treat a medication reminder. Keep a water bottle within arm's reach at all times. Keep eye drops by the bed, by the couch, and in the car. Offer a humidifier for the bedroom if dryness worsens overnight. These small habits don't cure Sjogrens, but they take one layer of discomfort off a body that's already carrying plenty. If you're learning that small acts of care aren't small at all, type nurture in the comments below. 6th, care partners. Never minimize their pain by comparing it to your own aches. My knees hurt too, and I'm still working, or I get tired too, everyone does, might be meant as solidarity, as a way of saying I understand, we are in this together. But care partners, more often than not, it lands as dismissal instead. Joint and muscle pain in Sjogrens isn't ordinary soreness from a long day on your feet. It can be persistent, it can migrate from one joint to another, and it's tied to systemic inflammation running through the body, the kind that doesn't resolve with a good night's sleep or an over-the-counter pain reliever the way typical tiredness or soreness does. Fatigue in Sjogrens works the same way. It isn't the kind of tired you feel after a busy week that a weekend off can fix. It's a deep, cellular exhaustion that can be present even after a full night's sleep. Comparing it to a normal ache, even with the best of intentions, can make your loved one feel like they have to justify or prove their pain to you, like they're being cross-examined instead of comforted. And once someone feels like they need to defend their pain just to be taken seriously, they often stop mentioning it at all, which means you lose visibility into how they're actually doing, right when you need it most. Instead, simply acknowledge it without comparison. That sounds really hard today. What would help right now? You don't need to match their pain with a story of your own to show you care. Sometimes the most supportive thing you can say is nothing more than I hear you, followed by a genuine offer to help, whether that's grabbing a heating pad, taking something off their plate for the day, or just sitting with them for a few quiet minutes. If your pain has ever needed to be believed instead of measured, type valid in the comments below. 7th, care partners. Never overschedule the day. A single day with a doctor's appointment in the morning, grocery shopping in the afternoon, and a family dinner in the evening might look completely reasonable on a calendar. To a healthy body, it's just a busy Tuesday. But for someone managing fatigue, pain, and possible brain fog, that's not one day of activity, it's 3 separate withdrawals from an already limited account, each one chipping away at a battery that started the day only partially charged. What looks like a full but manageable schedule on paper can, in practice, be more than the body can absorb without a cost. Overscheduling can trigger a flare that then costs several recovery days afterward, effectively undoing whatever the busy day accomplished and then some. And this is where caregivers, without meaning to, can add pressure. Booking back-to-back appointments because it's convenient for your own schedule, or planning a full family event because it seemed like a good idea 2 weeks ago, without checking back in on capacity as the date gets closer. Your loved one may go along with it anyway, not wanting to cancel or disappoint anyone, and then quietly pay the price for days afterward. Instead, spread big tasks out and build buffer days in between demanding events. If there's a doctor's appointment on Tuesday, try not to also schedule something taxing on Wednesday. Think of energy in Sjogrens like a budget that has to stretch across the whole week, not just get someone through today. When you help plan the calendar with that budget in mind, rather than around convenience alone, you're doing some of the heaviest lifting a caregiver can do, often without your loved one even realizing how much smoother the week became because of it. A useful habit here is to ask, before adding anything new to the calendar, what's already on this week, and what would this cost us? A wedding, a move, a big holiday gathering, these things happen, and they don't have to be avoided altogether. But when you can see them coming, you can plan a lighter few days beforehand to bank some reserve, and a genuinely empty few days afterward to recover, rather than diving straight into the next obligation while the body is still paying off the last one. If you needed a reminder that pacing yourself is strength, not weakness, type balance in the comments below. 8th, care partners. Never ignore early flare warning signs. Many people with Sjogren's, once they've lived with the disease for a while, learn their own personal early warning signals. For one person it might be a specific kind of heaviness in the limbs. For another it might be increased dryness in the eyes and mouth a day or two before everything else hits, or joint stiffness that shows up before the fatigue does, or simply a vague off feeling that's hard to put into words but that they've come to recognize. These early signals are valuable information, almost like a weather forecast for the days ahead, and they show up before a full flare has fully arrived. If those early signs get brushed past, whether by your loved one themselves out of frustration with the disease, or by you because they seem okay right now and the calendar is full, you lose the window where rest or adjustment could have softened what was coming. Once a flare is in full swing, the options narrow considerably, mostly down to waiting it out. But in that earlier window, a cancelled non-essential errand, an extra hour of rest, or simply lightening the day's load can sometimes change the entire trajectory of the week. Instead, learn your loved one's early signs alongside them. Ask them, in a calm moment, not during a flare, what does it usually feel like right before things get worse for you? Write it down if it helps. Then treat those signals as your shared cue to pull back activity before things escalate, not after the crash has already happened. This turns flare management into a team effort instead of something your loved one has to monitor alone. If you're proud of yourself for learning to listen to your body's early signals, type listen in the comments below. 9th, care partners. Never treat brain fog like it reflects their intelligence or effort. When your loved one loses a word mid-sentence, forgets what they walked into the room for, reads the same paragraph 3 times without it sinking in, or blanks entirely on something they clearly know, it's easy, even unintentionally, to sound surprised, to jump in and finish their sentences for them, or to give them that little look that says, "How did you forget that?" None of it is meant to hurt, but in the moment, it can feel like being caught, like a private struggle has just become visible and judged. Brain fog in Sjogren's is a real, physiological symptom, tied to fatigue, systemic inflammation, and often disrupted or unrefreshing sleep. It is not a reflection of how sharp, intelligent, or capable your loved one is underneath it. It comes and goes with the disease's activity, sometimes clearing up almost entirely on a good day and settling in thick on a bad one, which can make it especially confusing for people around them who saw them razor-sharp yesterday and foggy today. That inconsistency is the disease, not a change in who they are. Being corrected, rushed, or visibly reacted to in those foggy moments can bring embarrassment on top of an already frustrating symptom, and over time it can make your loved one anxious about speaking up at all, worried they'll lose their train of thought in front of others and be judged for it. Instead, give them a beat. Let the pause sit for a moment before jumping in. And if it's clearly needed, gently offer the word or ask, "Want a second, or should I help?" That small phrase keeps the control in their hands rather than taking over, and it treats the moment as ordinary rather than alarming, which is exactly how it should be treated. If a foggy moment has never once changed how smart or capable you are, type clarity in the comments below. Finally, care partners, never forget your own regulation and your own limits. Chronic illness caregiving is a marathon, not a sprint, and Sjogren's in particular can be unpredictable in a way that's exhausting to plan around, week after week, month after month, sometimes for years. There's no clear finish line to count down to, no single milestone that tells you it's about to get easier. That kind of open-ended uncertainty takes a real toll on caregivers, even the most devoted ones, and it's something that deserves to be named out loud instead of quietly absorbed. Your tone when you ask how are you feeling, and your patience when the answer changes from hour to hour, matters far more than you'd expect. A calm, steady presence makes it easier for your loved one to be honest about how they're really doing, instead of downplaying it to protect you from worry or frustration. If your reaction to bad news is visible stress, sighing, or irritation, even if you don't mean it that way, your loved one may start editing what they tell you, which leaves you both worse off. But you cannot offer that steadiness from an empty tank. It's simply not possible to pour calm, patience, and warmth into someone else's day after day if your own reserves are running on fumes. Caring for yourself, your own rest, your own support system, your own moments to step away and recharge, isn't separate from caring for them. It isn't selfish, and it isn't optional. It's what makes the rest of this list sustainable for the long run rather than something you can only manage for a few good weeks before burning out. Reach out to other caregivers who understand this specific kind of exhaustion. Say yes to help when it's offered instead of insisting you can handle everything alone. Give yourself permission to have a hard day too, without needing to justify it, the exact same permission you're learning to extend to your loved one. If you're a caregiver who deserves care too, type strong in the comments below. Thank you for being here and for learning with me today, care partners. Chronic illness caregiving is one of the hardest jobs there is, precisely because so much of it is invisible, to the outside world, and sometimes even to yourselves. It's easy to measure your worth as a caregiver by how much you manage to do, and much harder to recognize the quiet, unglamorous work of patience, presence, and restraint that doesn't show up on any to-do list but that your loved one feels every single day. My goal with this list was to make that invisible work a little more visible, and to make your day-to-day a little bit easier because of it. I know many of you didn't sign up for this. It was something life handed you without warning, without a manual, and without much preparation, and here you are anyway, showing up, learning, adjusting, and doing your best in a role nobody trains you for in advance. I'm proud of you for that, and I'm glad to be able to walk alongside you as you figure it out. Take care of yourself this week, care partners, and I'll see you in the next one.